Welcome to our Scale Up Stateside episode, where today we are going to be focusing on what you need to know about applying for an E2 visa, which is the most popular visa for UK recruitment businesses looking to relocate employees to the US. For those who haven't joined us before, I'm Amy Davis, Managing Director at PGC Group, and we specialise in supporting recruiters expand to the US and also in providing employer record services for their contractors and clients. Today, joining me is someone actually who I hugely respect, having met her a number of times, and she's always impressed me with her level of knowledge and the sheer excellence with which they apply to everything that she does. So I'm excited to introduce the lovely and hugely impressive McKenzie Powell of Strive. McKenzie is the Operations Director of Strive, a recruitment business that specialises in building teams for venture capital-backed tech companies. Strive was founded 5 years ago and is headquartered in Manchester, and they've gone on to successfully set themselves up stateside and navigate the complexities associated with expanding to the US. And right at the centre of those plans, which have been successfully implemented, is McKenzie. Strive opted to set up their US-based operations in Tampa, a huge magnet right now for recruitment, and also in the opportunity state of Florida of mega proportions. So we'll hopefully tap into that a bit later about why Tampa, but we're going to get into the heart of why we've invited you on today's episode, McKenzie, which is the E2 visa. So hello and welcome to our episode.
Hello, Amy. I love to be here. Thank you.
No worries. So just so everyone knows, I just found out like 60 seconds before we come online that Mackenzie's actually on annual leave this week because she's moved into her first home. So Mackenzie, congratulations on your first home. I'm massively impressed that you're doing this on annual leave.
It's a bit of a nice break, to be fair, so I'll take it.
You're mainly unpacking boxes and just getting everything set up.
Yeah, very much so. We're laying the flooring of the new house as well, so I've left my partner doing that. So as I said, it's actually quite a nice break away from mayhem. So
well, hopefully over the next 30 minutes, that can be exactly that for you. And for our listeners, we've got a lot to get through in just 30 minutes. So we're going to cover what the E2 visa application process looks like, how long it takes, what investment is required, and what businesses can do to prepare to successfully achieve the visa status. Now, if anyone has any questions during today's episode that you'd like answering, as always, please drop them in the chat function and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can without distracting from the agenda that we've got set before us. If we don't have time to answer your questions, don't worry, because we always come back to everyone after the episode has finished. So let's get to it then. So when we talk about immigration and the US, I always talk about it as a system of an alphabet of letters and numbers, and it can be very overwhelming when first researching visas in the US. But for recruitment businesses and for what they need to get set up stateside, the most commonly one that is chosen is an E2 visa, which is an employer-sponsored visa. And a lot of recruitment businesses take this route. Some have tried and not been successful in gaining it. Lots have done it and have felt, I'll say, the pain of doing it, but also the massive learning lessons. And the E2 visa is actually something that me and our team at PGC get a lot of questions about. So, McKenzie, you led that for Strive. So do you want to talk us through what the process typically looks like and how you went about it?
yeah, of course. The word that you just used in that intro there of overwhelming is so accurate. I think when you first embark on a project like this, if you've not done it before, you can feel so overwhelmed of even where to begin. So the initial stages for us is network, speak to people that have done it. You know, we had a conversation with PGC and just spoke to as many people as possible prior to starting the project itself. The E2 visa, so one of the first stages, you need to select an immigration lawyer. We spoke to 3 different immigration lawyers that were recommended to us, and you can get a feel to who would be best to partner with. And then we also selected our US accountants prior to starting the E2 visa as well. So with those 2 support networks, they pretty much give you a process map of what is needed to achieve the application. So that was super useful because, again, when you're embarking on the project initially, you don't necessarily know what you need to achieve, whereas you have professionals explaining each step. So the first step for ourselves was setting up an entity. We set up an entity in Delaware, and although we're not based in Delaware, when speaking to people, it's very commonly known Delaware is a very UK law friendly state. So you set up in Delaware and then you register to trade to do business further down the line in a state of your choice. So you set up the entity. The next stage for us was applying for an EIN, which is an employer identification number. That caused a bit of issue for us because the lead time on that is meant to be 6 weeks. It ended up taking 13 weeks to come through from the IRS. And excuse me for kind of giving my opinion here, but it felt a bit backwards because you actually fax the application. It's not online. So there's no trace whatsoever. So where that application is up to, whether it's been seen, whether it's been received. So yeah, that for us was a bit of a hurdle along the way. So you've got your EIN. Once you've got your EIN, you can then set up a bank account, which is obviously a really fundamental part of the process. You need to invest, you need to pay suppliers through the bank account. Again, that can be a bit troublesome. A lot of the big banks aren't interested in UK businesses. You need a presence in the UK, in the US. You need some form of trading history. But we used a recommendation from our accountants. And so we set up one after we had the EIN in a matter of a week, to be fair. It's quite quick. So those are some of the really big ticket items of the application, but you also, as part of it, need a business plan. And even as an operations manager, a business plan is, again, a pretty overwhelming piece of document, isn't it? It requires a lot of work. So on the recommendation of our immigration lawyer, we actually put that work to a third party and paid somebody to do the business plan for us.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So we supplied them with all the information that they required, and they're an expert in creating business plans for this type of application. So it put a lot of the time element away from us onto this professional. And also it comes with a price tag, which for us was important because you need to invest quite heavily as part of the as part of the application. So again, quite a heavy price tag that contributed to the investment itself. And then alongside all of that, you've got all the documentation. You need to have your accounts ready from the UK company, organization chart, what it looks like in the UK, what it looks like in the US, how's the US company owned. Another big tip for the application as well, you need to prove every single payment that you've made as a contribution to the investment. I couldn't speak more highly of our finance director. Every invoice was tracked against the bank statement. And then by the time that we came to submit, everything aligned, which if you leave it to the last minute, going through, 9 to 12 months of invoices and trying to match them to big documents wouldn't be a fun job. So I definitely recommend tracking that as you go along.
Yeah. It's a really good point, actually, McKenzie. It's something that we always speak to a lot of founders at the very beginning stages of, even just them accessing the US market from the UK is track any revenue that you raise from the US, track it by state that it's raised from, and then also track any spend that's associated with generating business from the US because it will all count. And even, a lot of people will not realize they're actually investing already in the US as part of that. Do things like, advertising on jobs boards like LinkedIn. If that's for US related jobs, make sure you're tracking that spend because it can all count towards it at a later point down the line, and it saves on picking it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. So that process, there's a lot to it, and we'll try and break that down a little bit for everyone today. But we've just had a question around the differences between E2 and H1B visas. Just so everyone knows, an E2 is an employer-sponsored visa. It's often used for relocating employees under a company that is going to reside and operate in the States. H1B visas are slightly different, and without detracting from today's episode and what we're talking about, is essentially that is also used, but it's more for foreign nationals who are wanting to contract in the States and do contracted temporary work. So it's not a traditional visa in the same sense as what an E2 is. But we can pick that up offline if you'd like to, and we can talk about that separately. So that process then, there was a lot of kinds of steps in there, McKenzie, and we'll try and break down some of those. just want to ask one question. Actually, why was it important that you engage with an accountant? Because I think a lot of people would naturally need to speak to an immigration lawyer, but what was the accountant in that, process? What role did they play and why was that important?
So we found our US accountants via our UK accountants. So naturally, we have a really good relationship with our accountants here in the UK. And we
Yeah.
first spoke to them about the project because they will have some area of experience in expansion. And they had not necessarily a sister company, but a close relationship with a US accountant. And their main contact was actually a British guy who we made contact with. And the reason that we formed that relationship initially was he was just so knowledgeable. He was so informative and knowledgeable. And when you can build a relationship with somebody that's able to guide you and provide information, it's just invaluable. I couldn't recommend it more. And also, we wanted to, although it was quite early on, be ensured that we were taking the right necessary steps for the IRS and for, the laws in the US as a UK company, because it can be a bit of a minefield, can't it? And, ensuring that your Xero or your accounting firm is set up correctly. We just found that having the US accountants by our side was a really good support mechanism to ensuring we're doing the right thing at the right time, as well as having the immigration lawyer as a support as well.
Brilliant. And it's so key, not just to kind of an immigration process, but just generally to US expansion, is to have the right experts at the right part in that process. And definitely accountants who understand the tax treaties that exist between the UK and the US and therefore can make you as tax efficient as possible, but also ensure that you're operating compliantly. So it was just interesting to hear you talk about them from an immigration sense. So thanks for that. So that process, just to go back, really a lot of steps involved there, not easy steps, quite sizable, chunkable pieces of work. How long does it typically take and how long did it take you from that kind of very first step to actually getting your visa?
So we first started having the conversations, I would say, starting to look at where we should be looking and who we should be speaking to in November 2021. And we started this project a little bit differently to the majority of people that I speak to, but everyone's normally quite impressed with what we did. We ended up doing a 3-month research project of where we should locate, which was just fundamental in choosing the state, which I'm sure we'll do a bit later. So we officially started the ET process itself and set up the entity in Delaware at the beginning of April. And then we got our visas approved at the beginning of February. So it was probably a 10 to 11 month process. Again, a bit of a delay with the EIN number. We thought we had quite a lot of leeway we originally had a January launch date, but the EIN, which took 13 weeks. And then also by the time our application went through, it was November time. So you had Thanksgiving, you had Christmas. So it took a while to do interviews as well. So there were a few delays that were out of our control, but it was approximately 10 to 11 months.
And from the point of actually submitting the application to the embassy, what was that to approval?
So it was about 4 to 5 weeks, I believe, from submission to finding out that we could pick an interview. And then it was about 2 to 3 weeks after that. So probably about 8 weeks.
Brilliant. So that's back at pre-pandemic levels, because I know in COVID, when the office shut and you couldn't do in-person interviews, it massively created a huge backlog. So good to hear that it's back to kind of that 6 to 8 week mark, which is good. What hurdles did you face within that process along the way, and how did you overcome them?
So I mentioned then obviously the time frame for the EIN number. There was no overcoming. I spent many hours on the phone to the IRS. Whether that sped up our application being reviewed and I'm not sure. The other one, as what I missed off to begin with, as part of the E2 visa, you need an office space. You need to have a space prepaid and the lease signed prior to applying for the visa itself. And because we were looking at office spaces in the June, but not looking to open up until the January, it was quite difficult because we wanted a service office and they don't know whether they're going to have availability in January for us to start then. And we're looking to prepay the 6 months. So we wanted to go into a WeWork, which is where we're based in Manchester. And then in the end, we got introduced to Industrious, who I'm not sure if you're aware of. They do have them here in the UK, very common in the US. and they had a quieter office space in a part of Tampa, and they allowed us to sign up with a January start date,
Brilliant.
months up front. So that took a little bit of kind of
Working out.
yeah.
It's such a chicken and egg.
It is exactly.
And it's
Very,
very, very common. It's like, we've got to demonstrate investments, but we're not ready to invest because we need the visa to get there and invest the cash. So yeah, it's a very, very common hurdle that a lot of people, it will resonate probably with a lot of people who've been through it too.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We have got another question, which is around opening a US bank account from the UK and just, what that process looked like. I know you said you did it quite quickly in a week. So would you mind just quickly summarising that before we move on?
To be fair, we were really fortunate. You mentioned, why did we have US accountants prior to getting the E2 visa, but they're the ones who introduced us to our bank, because initially the big banks won't touch you, the likes of Chase, for example. You're just a little company in the UK and you have no trading history, you don't have a presence, and you need a contact within the bank in order to have a face-to-face conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, the larger banks, a lot of them require a signature on paper. So unless you're in the US at that time, it's quite an expensive trip to go open a bank account. So we were really fortunate. Again, once you've got the relationship with your US accountants, they should be able to introduce you to a bank. And that's such a good foot in the door because you've got an accountant recommending you as a business.
Really good advice.
Yeah, that ended up being super simple for something that initially we were like, no one will, give us a bank account. How are we going to do this? And then our accountant introduced us to the right bank.
I think generally as well, I'm sure you guys have found this, is America is ahead, in so many ways, but when it comes to the finance sector, it's so behind. And if you talk about, sending a fax to the IRS, I laugh because I can't believe they're still using fax, but I'm also kind of not surprised. And particularly kind of with the finance sector, it's very, very common for clients to pay businesses by check.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bit of a shock to the system. For a lot of UK businesses who haven't dealt with checks for probably, quite some time. But the process, as you say, of setting up with a bank and, having to physically be there or physically sign something is definitely, a hurdle that has to be overcome. It's not limited to immigration or setting up a bank account, but just generally, I know with PGC, we obviously have our UK entity and we have our US entity where everything is run through. And I kind of have the opposite challenge, being present to authorize and sign things. So definitely is a hurdle to think about. Okay, right. So when part of that whole visa process, we spoke about kind of the chicken and egg situation, and what's really clear is the fundamentals of business decisions about US expansion have to be made before you start the visa application process. Mm-hmm. And one of those biggest decisions to make is location of choosing where you're actually going to register the business. And you mentioned earlier on that the business was incorporated in Delaware. For everyone who's listening, we do have a blog on our website about why Delaware, why a company's incorporated there. So please do check that out, and we'll put a link in the comments as well. But once you've incorporated, you then need to choose the business where it's set up to register. Now, you guys chose Tampa. And I know that when it comes to choosing a location, it has many factors that make up that decision. So could you share with us what your considerations were as a business when you were choosing your location of Tampa?
Yeah, of course. So there's a lot of states, a lot of cities to choose from when we're looking at the US. Our initial long list was based upon tax incentives. What was the most tax-friendly state?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that shortlisted us to 3 states, which was Florida, North Carolina, and Texas. And then we had 2 cities in each. And as an SLT, we created a criteria of what was important to us. And that's anything from talent pools of local talent, cost of living for the people that are going to be living there, taxes for the business itself, lifestyle, how long it takes to travel from your UK office to the US office.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then time zones as well. What's the time zone difference between your headquarters and the US office? And also, what's it like to travel to your clients within your career as well? So that was our search criteria. So I spent the 3 months which I don't necessarily recommend 3 months. It was really fortunate that I had this amount of time, but by taking the time and researching into all these elements that are really important to you as a business, you learn so much along the way that by the time the 3 months was up, I've spoken to so many people, looked at so much data, which I felt I was so much more knowledgeable than when I first started the project of researching. So we looked at all those different elements in those 3 different states. And by the time we'd presented it back to the SLT, there was only 3 cities. We had Tampa, which is where we're based, Charlotte in North Carolina, and Austin. Austin, when we first embarked, seemed like the obvious choice. Like everyone's going there. It's a tech hub, even companies in New York are going to Austin. But when we'd actually finished the research, for us as a business ourselves, it actually came out bottom, which was really, really interesting. And I will let you into a little secret as well. Charlotte was actually the city that came up top in terms of a business decision. But one thing you need to look at is the people that you're moving over from your UK company to the US. They need to be excited and they need to be invested into
the whole life is relocating.
Exactly. So it was a very close call. Charlotte didn't come up top by too much, but the decision that overrode that was the fact that we're sending UK staff there and we want them to be happy and comfortable. And Austin is gone through a massive wave of investment of people moving there. And we believe as a company, and the more people I'm speaking to agree the same, Tampa's like at the beginning of the wave. Like more people are migrating there, more companies, it's becoming a tech hub and it's a beautiful place as well. So I feel we've really made the right decision and joined there at the right time as well, which is a good business decision.
Yeah, and definitely. And honestly, the foundation of building US business is research. So those 3 months were not wasted 3 months at all, because it's really set you up for success. And we see so many businesses that don't do the research and just opt, maybe for an obvious one. And then there's a lot of wasted money that's invested into that when it fails. And often it's kind of back to the drawing board. And so, all those months of no research to then fail and waste that money means that your 3 months was well invested up front. Yeah. So pretty great and sterling job. And, absolutely is important because to consider the team that you're sending over and what's going to work for them, because just as you said, you want that team to be happy and you want them to be thriving, not just from a career perspective, but from a life perspective too, because if they're not happy, ultimately it's going to reflect in performance for the business as well. So I definitely think you made the right choice there. So how many people have you relocated over there and how are they getting on?
Yeah, so we've got 3 UK staff over there now. So our our co-founder and director, Harrison, was the first employee to go over. And the first person that you send over is representing both the business's visa application and their individual's application as well. So poor Harrison had quite a lot of weight on his shoulders for that interview, but he did really well. And then we sent over one of our sales managers who's been with the company for 4 years. He's gone over as managing director. And then just recently, a couple of weeks ago, we sent another sales manager over, Dylan. But what's super important to us as well, and, advice to give to anyone else considering this project, it's really, really important to also hire locally. You need to build a US local team. If you think about here, if you joined a company in the UK that was just solely US citizens, you'd feel it was a US company rather than a UK company. So we've got 3 people over there at the moment, but the plan is to hire locally. But we also still want to give people the opportunity here in the UK to move over as well. So part of our career development plan, they can have the opportunity if it's what they wish. But kind of where we're at the moment, the main priority is hiring locally and building in there.
McKenzie, I'm smiling so much because you're saying everything that we share with our clients. It is about building an American business, and that starts and originates from the UK. And the culture and identity and DNA of who Strive are is core to that. And once you've stapled that, if you like, in Tampa, Florida, then it's about really building out that American business and bringing in American talent. And then hopefully, maybe another location, maybe North Carolina might be next, who knows? So, and I'm just conscious of time. We've got 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Just for everyone who's listening, specific to that E2 visa, what would you share as, the key learnings that you took from it?
Every single stage of it, to be fair. It was such a learning curve. But the key learnings is network and speak to people. Like, I could not recommend it more. And Amy, I know you're very much front and center of this group, but the RDLC, they deserve a shout out because they have a specific WhatsApp group and a specific part of their agency, which is specific to expanding in the US. And whenever you come to a hurdle or whenever you're unsure on a certain factor, you can ask this question in the WhatsApp group, and you've got people who have done it already or people who are on the same project being able to answer something that you had no idea of how to overcome. So network, join recruitment networking companies, speak to people. Those are definitely my key learnings. And what I would say as well, as a director or as an owner of the business, you might want to embark on this project yourself. For me personally, I feel so fortunate that I was exposed to this project. It's when I first began, I had no idea what it meant, how to do it. And, I'm now able to replicate something I've done in this company, further down the line and potentially in another company. And I feel really fortunate for that. So if you can allocate the project lead to somebody in your team of a similar role to myself, you've got someone who's passionate about it, accountable, able to delegate different tasks. So that's definitely a big tip from myself for any other business that's looking to start the project.
Brilliant. Yeah, I totally agree with recruitment networks and peer-to-peer learning. Hearing from other, leaders of recruitment businesses who have done it. And I know RDLC has massively helped strive in that process. So great to hear. So last question for you. If you had to go through the process again, is there anything that you'd change? Maybe something might be around the EIN, I don't know.
Well, control the controllables. I don't know if I could change the time frame there. The biggest factor that I would change is the location of where we based ourselves in Tampa. So again, we were quite restricted with options to pay up front for a future start date of a lease for an office. So when we were given the opportunity and Industrious gave us this one location, I said, yes, perfect, we'll go for that. I did research into the location itself. So when we started interviewing people, Tampa locals, we soon found out that the area that we'd selected didn't have the best reputation. It's like a very up and coming area for anyone who knows.
Hard to attract talent.
Yeah, and like when you said where it was based, people were like, ooh. But it was only a 6-month lease, so we were really able to kind of spin that around and, lease. At the end of the 6 weeks, it's really exciting. We're going to find the perfect location, the office for that project. So what I would say, definitely research into every single element, especially where you're going to base yourself and where you're going to be asking people to come into the office on, a daily basis or a few days a week.
Oh, brilliant. Listen, McKenzie, I can't thank you enough for coming on. As I said at the beginning, the multiple times we've spoken or met at events, I've always been hugely impressed by just you and how you carry yourself. I know I fed that back to your founders as well at the time, but also just strive as a business and everything that you guys stand for. Your amazing new brand. If anyone hasn't seen it, check that out because McKenzie led that one as well. And just thank you so much for contributing. I know what you shared has been highly valuable. So that's a wrap on today's session. If you are pleased by what you've heard and you want to understand more in general, or maybe you've got, specific questions about the US market, then shortly after I finish speaking, there'll be a short video with QR codes or link that you can use to book in a session either with me or one of the team at PGC. And I'm more than sure that McKenzie wouldn't mind you connecting with her on LinkedIn and asking her a question as well, because she's super, super helpful in every way. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, McKenzie, again, and take care and see you next time for our next episode. Bye, guys.